Anthony Albanese and his government are so far out of touch with mainstream Australians, it's not funny anymore. The country is crying out about the cost of living crisis. The inflation numbers yesterday just added to the worries, and they'll add to the problem too if they trigger another interest rate rise. But the Prime Minister thinks the biggest thing happening in this country is the return of a paranoid former computer hacker, the anarchist Julian Assange. If Albanese actually thinks there are votes in this for him, I think he's sadly deluded. He probably won't even get Assange's vote. He'd be more likely to vote for the Greens or even end up voting for himself. Watch that space. I warned last night, I just had a feeling that the Prime Minister might try to insert himself into the theatre around the arrival of Assange into Canberra. And I warned last night that this would be wrong. But I sure as hell hope we don't have government ministers or the like joining this particular picture opportunity. I mean, imagine if the Prime Minister turns up wrestling with Rudd and Smith and Assange for the best optics. Surely not. That'd be the wrong way to welcome a convicted criminal who's been through a trauma of his own making and who has generated enormous costs and strife for his nation. Well, he didn't turn up at the airport, but Albo made sure he was the first person to speak to Assange after the landing while he was still on the plane. And he made sure that he told the world about it too, posting a picture and then calling a news conference when he should have been watching the State of Origin.
I was pleased to speak with Mr Assange, to welcome him home and had the opportunity to ask about his health and to have my first discussion with him. His safe return to Australia, we know, means so much to his family.
Honestly, this is for a convicted felon, a man who had just pleaded guilty to an espionage offence against our greatest ally, the United States. It was a crime against the interests of Australia as well as the United States. And Assange has not been maltreated by any government or held against his will or denied justice. Quite the opposite. Assange, for more than a decade, has refused to answer charges. First, the sexual assault charges from Sweden. Where's the Me Too movement on that? And then the breach of classified information charges from the US. Assange could have answered the charges and had his day in court more than 5 years ago on those counts, but he tried every trick to avoid it. He used every legal tool and he put himself in what was really a self-imposed incarceration in the UK until he finally entered the guilty plea yesterday. And the Prime Minister treats him like a hero. I'd prefer to take the word of a real war correspondent, Michael Ware, who reported from the front line for years in real combat situations in the Middle East and had this to say this morning.
I regard him as a traitor in the sense that during a time of war, when we had American, British and Australian troops in the field under fire, Julian Assange published troves of unredacted documents. So that puts the soldiers at risk, that puts our methods and our methodology at risk, and it also puts the locals who are putting their lives on the line at risk.
Yeah, well said, Michael Ware. Or there's the former Army officer James Brown, who served in Iraq and Afghanistan before returning to chair the New South Wales RSL and now head up the Invictus Veterans Charity. He posted on Instagram today that Julian Assange isn't a hero. He isn't a journalist. He chose not to face due legal process in the US and Sweden and the UK. He risked the lives of Australian soldiers by his recklessness and caused the deaths of Afghans we worked with by his indifference. They get no homecoming. Now, this is powerful and telling stuff. Yet listen to this exchange last night.
And there are many views about Julian Assange, as you said. Some do not regard him as a hero. Do you think he was a journalist who was wrongfully pursued over what he did?
Oh, look, I think that there will continue to be different views about Julian Assange and his activity. My role as Prime Minister has been to firmly say that whatever the views that people have, there was no purpose to be served by this ongoing incarceration. And can I say that when I spoke with Mr Assange tonight, he described it as a surreal and happy moment. He's landing here in our national capital, Canberra.
No, Prime Minister, your role is to say in direct and unambiguous terms that while you might have been pleased to break the impasse and get Assange home, he is a convicted felon. He recklessly published classified information that damaged the interests of our key ally and damaged our interests too, and put lives at risk. Prime Minister, it's not hard. You just have to stick to the facts and support the national interest and show some authority rather than trying to play to the weird coalition of loopy lefties and nutty right-wingers who treat this bloke like a hero. Foreign Minister Penny Wong was just as bad.
Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong joined me earlier. I started by asking her if Julian Assange is a martyr or a criminal.
There are obviously a range of views about Mr Assange and his actions. What we believed was this matter had dragged on too long.
There are a range of views? Well, what genius and what cowardice. It's a simple matter of fact. Assange is a criminal. He was convicted and sentenced for his criminal act, publishing classified documents. He pleaded guilty himself. Yet we get only obfuscation from the government. The same government that's charged with gathering, receiving and protecting classified information and intelligence right now. Do they not take that responsibility seriously? Jackie Lambie gets it.
Free speech is a great thing, but, you know, sometimes free speech puts other people's lives in danger, and that bothers me a lot. Okay. Say this with all due respect, I really don't care about Julian Assange this morning, and I say that politely as I possibly can, but there is a lot of people doing it out there tough.
And even the dripping wet coalition spokesman on foreign affairs got it right, showing more strength and certitude than the Prime Minister.
Yesterday, Julian Assange pleaded guilty in a United States court to charges under the US Espionage Act, and by nightfall he was welcomed home by the Australian Prime Minister. That just sends all of the wrong signals and is irresponsible and inappropriate of Anthony Albanese.
Spot on. The lionising of Assange from the political left, and of course encouraged by some on the right, is pathetic. This weird and misplaced fawning from the government will backfire on them. First, in the here and now, it only confirms that they've got warped priorities. I mean, focusing on lowering inflation and the cost of living might be a better use of their time than feting a professional anarchist. And secondly, Assange will hardly go quietly into an anonymous life. We can expect his future will be highly political, whether it's media-based or even in politics. And he's highly unlikely to favour mainstream political movements like the ALP, and nor is he likely to provide any support or comfort for US allies like Australia. In short, sometime in the future, perhaps the very near future, Labor will want to put distance between themselves and Assange, and they should have started that yesterday.